Hello, this is Allan Powell, and today we are going to talk about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. This is one of Jesus's best known parables, but probably not one of his most popular. The rich guy goes to hell, the poor man goes to heaven. Surely there is more to the final judgment than that. Was this a really bad rich man? Or was Lazarus a really good beggar? Well, one of the first things we teach in Bible school is that you do not get theology from parables. Parables are designed to make us think, but they were never intended to teach theological principles or religious doctrine. We know from Scripture that salvation is a free gift of God given to all sinners. Going to heaven is not a matter of being rich or poor, or even a matter of being good or bad. Jesus died for us, and we trust in him for our salvation. Rich people, poor people, good people, bad people, all are saved through the blood of Christ. The parable is really about honor and shame. At the time when Jesus told this story, most people in the world would have thought the rich man was the perfect example of what they considered to be honorable. He wears purple, which I guess must have been the height of fashion. And he dines in splendor every night. He probably even took baths. Good clothes, good food, good house. He was such a cultured, dignified, honorable man, one that we could all look up to. And Lazarus, the beggar, well, he was the perfect example of someone who lived in shame. Homeless, hungry, dressed in rags, covered with sores, dirty and smelly. Just about everyone would have looked at him and thought, disgraceful. No one would have looked up to him or wanted to be like him. You can judge for yourself whether people in our world might have similar values. In any case, the shocker for Jesus' parable comes when the veil is pulled back and all of a sudden we see things the way that God sees them. The rich man, a potential citizen of hell, and Lazarus, well, he winds up in the bosom of Abraham, the greatest honor one could imagine. It was like a first century version of being on Mount Rushmore with George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. The point is simply, things are not always the way they appear, and our foolish brains are easily deceived. The people we most admire may not be worthy of that admiration, but the homeless vet on the street corner, well, he might be. Maybe we already know that. In any case, the point for Jesus is not that we should judge or condemn rich people. Rather, we should refrain from judging or condemning the poor. Judge not, that you be not judged. That is one moral of the story. We are all defective. Some of us are better at hiding what's wrong with us, and others have defects that are just more socially unacceptable. But we all want grace. We all want to be treated better than we actually deserve. Treating people better than they deserve. That is the honorable thing to do. Hello again. Today we have the parable of the rich fool from Luke chapter 12. This is really a parable for our modern day. The story of a man who has all that he needs, but he wants more. His barns are full, but he wants more. This is the story of a person who has a lot of stuff. First, you put stuff in the basement, but then the basement is full. Then you put stuff in the attic and in the garage. And well, pretty soon the garage and the attic are full. What can you do with all your stuff? You can rent one of those storage units. They have little ones for pretty cheap. And when it's full, well, you can always get a bigger one. This just may be a story to which some of us can relate. The man's biggest problem is where to keep all his stuff. His barns are all full. And then one night he has a revelation. The light bulb goes off and he knows what he needs to do. Of course, we are all thinking the answer is obvious. Less stuff. But no, that's not it at all. The answer, he decides, is not less stuff, but bigger barns. That's what I need. Bigger barns. Jesus says this man's a fool. He does not say that he's a bad man or a wicked man or a sinner. He is simply a foolish man. And why is he a fool? Because life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. That's what Jesus says. This man has accumulated lots of possessions, but he missed out on life. He forgot to live. People like owning things. I know I do. A long time ago, I had lots of record albums. And then I had lots of CDs. And now I have lots of downloads. I can buy songs on iTunes and then I own them. I have bought so many songs that my phone is full and my iPad is full and my computer is full. What can I do? Oh, the cloud. Yes, I can put all my songs in the cloud, and it is just like a bigger barn. Jesus says that I am a fool. And do you know why? Well, for one thing, I have bought so many songs that I will never be able to listen to them all. There's no time for that. Still, I like owning them. But here's another reason why Jesus says I am a fool. People don't own things. Not really. All the music I stored in the cloud, all the stuff in your garage or attic or basement, it's not really ours. Not ours to keep. We don't really own anything. The Bible says we are dust, and to dust we will return. We bring nothing into this world, and we will take nothing out of it. Or as my daddy used to say, there's a reason you never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul. Everything belongs to God. And we are only stewards or caretakers of things that God lets us have on loan. Our time, our money, our families, our physical bodies, just on loan for a little while. That pretty face of yours, that brilliant mind, that vivid imagination, oh, so precious, but not yours to keep. Just on loan. That tract of land, your house, your car, your boat, your bank account, your pension, it's all on loan. So don't be a fool. Enjoy being who you are and use whatever God has given you. Be grateful for it all. Just don't stow it away someplace where you think it will be yours forever. And don't forget to live. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Hello again. Today we have the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. This is a Goofus and Gallant parable. Do you know about Goofus and Gallant? When I was a child, we got Highlights magazine, and every issue had a full page of cartoons devoted to Goofus and Gallant, depicting how little boys should and should not act. Gallant was the good example. At Thanksgiving, he would ask, "Would anybody else like that last piece of chicken?" And in the other column, we would have a picture of Goofus practically climbing on the table and grabbing a drumstick for himself. Gallant always said, "Please," and "Thank you." Goofus didn't even brush his teeth. He'd stick the brush under the water and just say he did. So here, in Jesus's parable, we have two guys like Goofus and Gallant, the good example and the bad example. But typical of Jesus, there is a surprise. The role of Goofus goes to a Pharisee, one of the most highly respected religious leaders of the day. And the good example is a tax collector. I mean, we still don't like those people. And trust me, it was way worse in Bible times. Nobody liked the tax collectors. This tax collector is a good example for one reason only. He knows who he is. He stands in the temple, afraid to lift his eyes to heaven, and says, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." He knows that everything depends on God's grace. He would have made a good Lutheran. I am still waiting for some ELCA congregation to call itself Saint Tax Collector Lutheran Church. We have St. Mark's and St. Andrew's, and St. Paul's, but more than any of the apostles or heroes of the Bible, the tax collector in this parable is presented as a role model for us all. Saint Tax Collector Lutheran Church. Think about it. But the role of Goofus in this story is played by a Pharisee, and he's a really good guy. He's a tither. He fasts twice a week. He goes to church every Sunday. Temple every Saturday. But he is just so pleased with himself. He doesn't need anything from God. If anything, he probably thinks God owes him one. In Luke's gospel, self-righteousness is the greatest sin of all. People are self-righteous when they fail to see their own faults and defects. They are self-righteous when they think they are better than other people. They are self-righteous when they think, well, I may have a few problems, but at least I'm better than most people. I am for sure better than those people. Thieves, rogues, adulterers, or, well, that tax collector over there. Oh my goodness, how did he even get in here? This temple needs better ushers, bouncers. That's what it needs. How am I supposed to pray in a place that just lets tax collectors come in and wander about? But self-righteous people are not evil. They aren't to be despised. They are to be pitied. This is what makes the story of Lent so fascinating. In Luke's gospel, the bad guys, if we can call them that, are not bad people, at least not in the usual sense. They are self-righteous people. Jesus criticizes them, and eventually they end up crucifying him. But even on the cross, he does not despise them. He pities them. The last thing he says about people who behave like the Pharisee in this parable is this: Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. The tax collector would have understood that. Hello there. Today we have Jesus's parable of the two debtors. It's a short parable, and it's not one of the better known ones, not one of Jesus's more memorable sayings, but pretty important once we get at it. On the surface, it is very simple. If two people owe you money, and you tell both of them to, just forget it, which one will love you more? The one who owed you $1, or the one who owed you hundreds of dollars? Love you more is a strange way of putting it. That's a super literal translation, but in this case, the point is more, who will appreciate it more? This is a parable about gratitude, about thanksgiving. It is really a parable about worship. Jesus tells the parable to a religious leader who is a lot like the Pharisee in that parable that we read last week. This guy thinks that he is on pretty good terms with God. And in some ways, he probably is. He's not a bad person, but he is also not a grateful person. In some ways, of course, he's glad that God forgives his sins, but truth be told, he doesn't really think there is all that much that needs forgiving. And of course, he believes that God is there to help him when he needs it. But how often is that? Jesus says that gratitude comes from realizing how much we owe to God, which is everything. It's not just forgiveness of sins, though that is something. We say it pretty well in our confession. Not just what we have done, but what we have left undone. We have not loved God with our whole heart. We have not loved our neighbor as ourselves. But there is more. Everything we are, everything that we have, we owe to God. You may think that you have worked hard or studied hard to get to where you are. But God gave you the strength and the brains and the health and the energy. And thanks be to God that you had a family and friends and teachers to guide you. And thanks be to God that you live in a country where there is freedom and opportunity to become who you are and to do what you do. The point of Jesus' parable is to realize how great is our debt, how much we owe to God, so that we will appreciate what God has done for us, what God continues to do for us, so that we might be grateful people. In my latter years at the seminary, this was after Pastor Jeff graduated, I put newsprint on the walls, and I began every class by having students list things to be thankful for, to help remind us. I wanted these future pastors to be grateful people who love and appreciate God. I also just wanted them to be happy people. And I have noticed that there is a strong connection between gratitude and happiness. Grateful people are usually happy people. Well, we all had different lists. Personally, I am thankful that nature can be so beautiful. And I'm thankful that people have written books that I like to read and recorded songs that I like to hear. I didn't do anything to deserve any of that, but I'm glad for it. Also, purring. I'm glad that cats purr. I think that's cool, and I'm thankful for it. I think maybe grateful people just might be the second happiest people on earth. The happiest people? Well, I don't know, but I kind of think that generous people are the happiest people on earth. That's something to talk about another time. But I don't believe I have ever met a generous person who didn't start out as a grateful person first. That's what I get out of Jesus' parable of the two debtors. Realize how much we owe to God and be grateful for it. You'll be a happier person. Maybe you'll even go a step further and become a generous person. Hello again. This is Mark Allan Powell for what may be the very last time. You know, in all the other videos that we've done, I was sitting in front of some fake screen that had pictures, none of which were taken in my house. And sometimes there were bookcases full of books, and none of those are bookcases that I actually possess. But this time I am sitting in front of a very small bookcase with one little shelf of books. It's small, but kind of special because these are my books. All the books on this little bookshelf are books that I have written. See them? Those are my books. Pastor Jeff, of course, has read every single one of them from cover to cover, and he can tell you anything that you might ever want to know about them. But for today, we are going to talk about the parable in which people make excuses for not attending a banquet. Whenever I hear this parable, I think about a song that we used to sing in Luther League. Remember Luther League? That was the youth organization of the American Lutheran Church in which I grew up. The song came from a group of nuns called the Medical Mission Sisters, and I am not going to sing it for you, but it kind of went, I cannot come to the banquet. Don't bother me now. I have married a wife. I have bought me a cow. I have fields and commitments that cost a pretty sum. Pray hold me excused, I cannot come. I thought it was a fun song. And it wasn't until a few years later I found out the story was actually in the Bible. Well, you don't need a PhD to tell you what the point of the story is. People miss out on things that are truly special because they can't tear themselves away from what is merely ordinary. Nothing wrong with what is ordinary. Cows, fields, wives. We do have commitment, and we should keep them. But ordinary life becomes safe and predictable. And it can become an excuse for ignoring God's invitations. Invitations to a life that would be less predictable, but truly wonderful. Now, sometimes the church reads this parable as being about heaven. The great banquet, then, is heaven. And the point of the parable is that people miss out on going to heaven because they are so caught up with worldly things. I suppose that would be a very important message. I don't know that it's what Jesus really had in mind. Then sometimes I hear the banquet is like church. And the whole point of the parable is that people find all kinds of excuses for missing church or church activities. Again, maybe sometimes that could be it, but I don't know. When I was 16, I went to see Simon and Garfunkel in concert, and my mother was bothered because I had to miss a Lutheran League meeting in order to go. Well, that was more than 50 years ago. And Mom, I still remember that concert to this day. It was one of the great events of my life. I can't imagine that the film strip they were going to show at Lutheran League would have had the same impact. So, I don't think we can or should judge other people's decisions. We can't know what will be most meaningful or valuable to other people's lives. Everyone has to decide how to invest their time and their energy, and we should respect those decisions. I don't think that's what the parable is about. The parable does not actually talk about people who prioritize and make decisions. It is about people who make excuses. That's the whole point. For some reason, the people did not want to go to this banquet, and they just made up reasons for not attending. That's another matter. And at first it might seem odd. Why wouldn't they want to go to a banquet? Good food, music, dancing. And the story never says why they didn't want to go. So I guess maybe that doesn't matter. At the very least, we can probably assume the banquet was outside their comfort zone. An invitation to a banquet might sound truly exciting, but It was an invitation to something that was not ordinary or predictable. And Jesus suggests that lots of times people want to just stick with what is ordinary and predictable, even if it means missing out on what would have been fantastic. So, my advice, if you'll care to hear it, is once we get past Easter, just be on the lookout for invitations. Invitations to do things outside your comfort zone. Invitations to do something that would not be ordinary or predictable. Take a class or teach a class. Join a book club or start a book club. Join a gym. Learn Spanish. Go on a mission trip. Build a house for Habitat. I don't know. But do something that when you first heard about it, you wanted to come up with excuses for not doing it. Maybe you can think of lots of reasons not to do it. But are they real reasons or just excuses to not do something that wouldn't be ordinary or predictable? Don't let anyone judge you for making decisions about how to spend your time or talents or money or energy. Just be on the lookout for opportunities to experience the extraordinary. Because often, invitations that immediately prompt us to make excuses just might be the invitations we most want to accept. Oh, also, don't miss out on heaven, if that really is an issue. If you're not baptized, if you do not know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you do not want to miss out on the greatest invitation of all. Pastor Jeff can help you with that. Thank you for letting me be a part of your Lenten journey.